Hey everyone, Thomas with For Real Movie News and Reviews, here on the Flex Network to talk with you about movies. From new releases to upcoming blockbusters to the movie news you're going to want to know about, you're tuned in to Movies on Flex. Guys, I am so excited to be bringing you another episode of Movies on Flex. I hope everyone had a great Thanksgiving as we continue making our way through the holiday season. Now, if you follow my blog For Real Movie News and Reviews, you might notice it's been a little quiet over there for the past few weeks. Turns out November was a crazy month for me. My husband and I went on vacation. We hit Las Vegas, the Grand Canyon, and Phoenix to attend my best friend and blogging partner's wedding. Also, I got a new job, so I have started that and am learning everything that I need to know for taking over this new position. And then, of course, there's the general holiday stuff, visiting family and everything. So, yes, the culmination of all of that made it very difficult for me to pump out content. However, I do encourage you to subscribe because I will be updating all the movies that I've seen over November because I did still get a chance to make it to the theater and catch some interesting films. Some of which I'm going to talk about right now. So movies I got to catch in theaters in November include The Lighthouse again. If you saw the last episode, you know how much I raved about that film. Guess what? It's just as good the second time, at least for me. I also got to see Dr. Sleep, and actually, guys, that movie was so much better than I was expecting it to be. I mean, when you come off of a film like The Shining, which it's a bit bizarre, but it has this super, tense and suspenseful tone to it. It's so hard to follow that up, and a lot of the movie takes place in the real world when it comes to Dr. Sleep, and just kind of explores what this shining power does in real life, or how it affects real life. But the movie does get back to the Overlook and just has a finale that is just like the best way to have followed up The Shining. I saw Frozen 2 in theaters, and I mean, again, it's hard to follow up the original with how kind of iconic a lot of that music was in the first Frozen and how embedded that first movie has become in our culture. The music is still pretty catchy. I don't know if it'll catch on like the original music did from the first Frozen, but it's still kind of catchy and it's funny and kids will love it. Adults will be amused. I think it's just kind of it's a sequel. I also got to a theater to just barely tolerate Terminator Dark Fate. Everything that I had predicted and was concerned about in the last video that I did just seemed to come to fruition in watching that film. It definitely was not a movie that held my interest, primarily because, again, it's so off the beaten track of where Terminator should have gone. Yeah, there's some action, which will keep the action moviegoers interested, familiar faces that may also keep some people interested. I just didn't care. That is a movie that admittedly I went into not expecting to like, and I think just all of my concerns panned out with that movie. And then the big movie of the month, which I talked a little bit about in my last video and previewed a little bit, was The Irishman. I did venture up to Vancouver to check that out in theaters, which takes me right into my rants, raves, or review section. This will once again be a review, but not necessarily a rant or a rave, just a review. The Irishman is Martain Scorsese's latest cinematic entry. It is produced and released now on Netflix about this one man remembering and retelling his time as a mafia hitman. I guess I'll start by saying that it's a really, really well-made film, as you would expect from a director of cinema, as Martin Scorsese likes to put it. The film is very meticulous and thorough about how it tells its story, and it's never too preoccupied with rushing through any particular sequence or trying to put more action than necessary just to keep the 3.5 hours interesting. So very much a story-driven, very narrative-driven kind of film. I actually consider it in many ways to be more of a slice of life kind of narrative. It's just that this slice of life happens to take place over a very long period of time for this particular character's lifespan. But here's the thing, is as necessary as the length may have been to tell this particular story, it's one of the things that kind of put me off with the film. 3.5 hours was just a little bit too long to keep my attention focused on the film. I know probably about 3 hours in, I started getting antsy and fidgety and kind of ready for the movie to wrap it up. It's a very different dynamic than, say, The Avengers being 3 hours long, because Endgame was a movie that I could have actually sat through another half hour for, because there's just so much going on in that film with the different characters and the different storylines, and then the ultimate climax of that movie. Whereas The Irishman is much more low-key. It's very, as I said, meticulous and thorough about how it's telling this story. So you've got to have patience for it. But that kind of leads me to this particular observation that I might get some pushback on. But I just don't believe that The Irishman belongs on Netflix as its debut. Even though I got antsy and ready for the movie to end, I have to say, if you're going to watch The Irishman, you need to do it in a theater. And I don't know how many theaters are still playing it. The theatrical run was already limited as it was before it hit Netflix, and honestly, it's not within Netflix's best interest to run the movie in theaters when it's on the platform. But it's such a cinematic movie. It just is made to be on the big screen. And I'd be interested to have more conversations with people who watched it at home, where there's about 1,000 different things that can distract your attention within that 3.5 hour time span. But as far as I've seen, the reception for the film has been good. I know the friends that I have talked to that saw it in theaters absolutely loved it, significantly more than I did. So there's certainly, this is definitely a really big win for Netflix in terms of having that Oscar potential content on their platform. Now on to a bit of news. Actually, I heard earlier this month that there is talk about making a Joker 2. It turns out, despite concerns about the viability of a Joker film this dark and this serious in the DC cinematic world, the Joker movie, with directed by Todd Phillips and starring Joaquin Phoenix, has crossed $1 billion worldwide. It seems that this movie has earned such a, maybe not a following, but a mass of attention, which honestly I think the quality of the film deserves. I'm kind of middle of the road about it again, but I'm happy to see a standalone film outside of a DCEU and a big, superhero universe get so much attention and be so successful. Which brings me to my concerns about a Joker 2. Now, I'm a big fan of cinematic universes and properties crossing over. The MCU I have and probably will continue being a strong advocate for, because I think what Kevin Feige built with the Marvel world has been so immersive and so interesting when it came to crossing over and building up to the climax that it did. But in developing a Joker 2, I really hope that Todd Phillips, who it sounds like is going to reprise his role as director, in developing a Joker 2, I really hope that this is an effort that DC learns how to just focus on without trying to build a world bigger than what they can maintain within this story. As big of a fan as I am about the MCU, I am a complete non-fan of the DCEU. This Justice League, Aquaman, Batman versus Superman, Wonder Woman thing, it just doesn't work for me. I think it's too formulaic and the characters just aren't interesting enough. People might argue that Marvel is formulaic. Well, at least I like their characters. I think that what they've done with building stories around the characters and being very emotionally involved with the characters, particularly leading up to the climax that was Infinity War and Endgame, was just so great. I don't think any of the standalone DCEU films are anything that I like, and the crossovers are also less than interesting to me. I thought Justice League was just an awful film. But I think there's some potential with Joker. I think that they can actually do something super interesting and engaging, and maybe even expand the universe a little bit. I just hope they don't get ahead of themselves, and I hope Todd Phillips kind of keeps this story under control. Now I want to turn to a bit of news that I'm actually really happy to hear about, and that is the redesign of Sonic the Hedgehog. I heard it cost the production an additional $5 million to redesign the look of Sonic. But let me tell you something, that was a very necessary cost. I can't even explain how awful that first look at Sonic was. Just nothing, looked nothing like the original character, and I'm not entirely sure who even greenlit that. Like, who looked at that and said, yeah, that looks like Sonic, we can publish that. But the new trailer that came out shows Sonic redesigned, and this is what Sonic should have looked like the first time. So I'm super happy that the studio decided to take the extra step, put in the little extra cost to go ahead and redo the look of Sonic to make it resemble the original character a lot more. Honestly, I still think the movie's gonna be shit, but at least Sonic looks good, right? I think this is another case of the movie that came out, Detective Pikachu. Because let me tell you, the Pokemon in that movie were so perfect, and Ryan Reynolds voicing Pikachu, so perfect. The movies and the story was awful, but at least the Pokemon look good, and I think that's the case here with Sonic. Sonic's gonna look great now. I think Sonic's gonna be funny. I think he'll be an interesting character to bring to life, but I really think the movie's still gonna be awful. Alright guys, I want to look ahead at movies coming out in December because we actually have a pretty interesting lineup of films. On December 6th, Playmobil the movie comes out, which I couldn't be less interested in, but hopefully there's some people out there that might find it amusing and maybe kids might like it. More importantly, on December 6th is the expansion of the film Waves, which I'm looking forward to seeing. When it played at the Vancouver International Film Festival, it got all kinds of praise, and I've been hearing nothing but good things about that film. So I'll be checking that out when it hits the Bellingham Market on the 6th. On December 13th, Jumanji: The Next Level comes out, which really looks like a fun and funny follow-up to the most recent Jumanji film. I really like what they've done with that franchise, and I'm hoping that they kind of keep up with that momentum and do some really great and funny things with this Jumanji sequel. Also, that same weekend, a handful of other films come out, including Richard Jewell, Black Christmas, Bombshell, and Uncut Gems, all of which seem actually quite interesting. I think that that's a very intriguing mix of films for that weekend, and I'm gonna have a very full schedule of movie watching to do when all of those come out. December 20th, the adaptation of Cats comes out, which is going, of course, head-to-head with the release of Star Wars: The Rise of Skywalker. I already have 2 showings booked for that weekend. I'll probably see it a 3rd time that weekend, maybe a 4th. We'll see how good that movie turns out and how much I really want to rewatch it. And then Christmas Day, another slew of movies. The animated film Spies in Disguise comes out. The remake Little Women also comes out. Just Mercy goes wide in theaters, which also got a lot of praise out of the Vancouver Film Festival. And then the one movie that I think will be my favorite film of the year comes out that day, which is 1917. I've heard so many great things about it so far, and ever since the first trailer, that has been the movie that I've been looking forward to most. I just think that that is going to be my favorite film of the year. I am so excited for it. And with that, guys, I'm going to go ahead and wrap up this episode. Just a couple things to address before I go. Disney Plus did go live here earlier this month. I subscribed to it, and guys, honestly, I'm not the biggest fan. Disney Plus has really done a great job catering to what I like to call the nostalgic millennials, people that really enjoy the Disney original movies, the original TV shows, and a bunch of other old 90s kind of Disney entertainment. One of these people is my husband, and so we are going to continue to subscribe. But when it comes to The Mandalorian, kind of this big grown-up draw to the show, it's another thing that I'm just not terribly wild about. Again, a very well-produced series. It definitely feels Star Wars, and it kind of has that gravitas of a Star Wars story. But I am not the biggest fan of the week-by-week release. I think that this is a show I would have rather binge watch. And so I'm kind of struggling after 3 episodes to decide whether I'm actually going to keep watching it week by week or just hold off until January to watch them all at the same time. Finally, guys, don't forget to subscribe to For Real Movie News and Reviews. That's FORREEL. You can find us on social media at Movies For Real on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. You can also go to our website, moviesforreal.net. I can't wait to share my thoughts and top 10 lists with you for things of the year and movies of the decade, since we're coming to the end of that. Otherwise, everyone, keep enjoying your holiday season. I will check back in with you right before the new year starts so we can go over everything that came out in December, talk some more movies, and I will look forward to our conversation then. All right, this is Thomas with Movies on Flex signing out. Happy movieing.